Point motors. What type? Ease of installation? And cost? Let's find out. So just quickly, this audio is being recorded as a voiceover. I think it's going to be easier for me to talk to the camera that way, because we've got quite a bit to talk about. And we're going to take a deep dive into all the types of point motors and the pros and cons of each one. So what types have we got to start with? Well, we've got the solenoid, we've got the slow action, we've got surface mounted, and we've even got your basic servos that are more commonly seen in the RC world. So now we know what types are available, let's take a deep dive and discover some pros and cons, starting with the solenoid. A solenoid point motor uses a relatively simple mechanism. It's got two solenoids connected to power, and it uses that to pull a pin towards them, depending on which way you throw the point. Slightly more complex than that, but that's sort of the easiest and most simple way that I can explain it. So the pros, well, they're cheap. They are very cheap compared to a slow action. And obviously that's more beneficial as well if you're doing a big layout with lots of points. And size, they are relatively small. They take up much less room underneath the baseboard. As you can see on mine in the video now, the depth of my board is quite shallow. I should really say the height, so it does struggle a bit there when it comes to slow action. Cons, well, firstly they're noisy. So if you throw 3 or 4, you'll go bang, 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 bang. Some people like that noise, especially as a confirmation that the point is actually thrown. And the biggest issue for me is installation. There is no room for error whatsoever. The alignment has to be absolutely perfect. Now, speaking about alignment, there are jigs that you can buy that help with that, and they definitely do help with that and make it much easier, but it is another added cost. Another thing you need to buy is a CDU. I spoke about these in the previous videos. It's a capacitor discharge unit, and what that does is it stores the energy, stores the power, and when you throw the point, it releases all that in a burst, in one big burst, and then gives it enough sort of oomph to finally throw the point. So slow action. What's to know about slow action? Well, I'm going to start with the cons this time because I can only think of 2. And as you've probably already guessed, the first one is the cost. It's very expensive. Compared to the solenoids, again, it relates back to the big layout. If you've got a lot of points to do, there is going to be a cost involved with that. And the size is another issue for me, especially when we're talking about the cobalts and the tortoise ones. But there is quite a lot of pros, starting with the realism of them. In the real world, a point just doesn't just bang across, it slowly moves across, hence the name slow action. As for noise, they are very quiet in my opinion. There is a slight humming noise, but compared to a solenoid, it's almost silent. The installation, now this is a big factor. Installation of a slow action is very, very simple. It's very easy. There is room for error. As for wiring, I know the cobalts and the ones I'm using today, which are the MTB MP1s, they require absolutely zero soldering. As you can see, what I'm doing here in the video is they are screw terminals, and I believe on the cobalts they are push terminals which grip the cable. Surface mounted then. So surface mounted come in both forms already discussed, slow action and of course solenoid. So you've got the same pros and cons, except this time we have an added con that they are on the surface. They are right next to the track, they are visible, Again, there is of course ways to hide these using buildings and shrubbery and all that sort of stuff, but they are cheap, so it's worth considering. Servos, like I said, more commonly known in the RC hobby, and I just want to make it clear, I have zero experience with servos in the railway hobby. I used to build planes and boats many years ago with my dad, but everything I know, I have probably forgotten. They're technically slow action, they are very cheap, and especially cheap if you buy them in bulk, depending where you get them from. And they are slightly, I would say they're slightly more noisy than a slow action, but definitely quieter than a solenoid. But it is my understanding, and please, if you use them, comment down below how they work and what you need. But it's my understanding that you do require a few other things to get them working. Some circuitry, I believe, I think it's something like a command station or something like that, that allows them to talk back and throw the point, but please correct me if I'm wrong. There is also, more commonly seen in the exhibition world, point rodding, which is a simple push-pull technique. It's usually something like piano wire that's hidden under the baseboard so you can't see it, and I've seen them used with dowels and things. So where my switch is currently, there will be a dowel there connected to piano wire, and you would just pull it out or push it in depending on which way you throw the point. So the video in the background, I'm currently just sort of finishing up the, call it test bed, to make sure the points are working. So the next thing I think we should do is take a look at these MP1s and how to install them, because like I said, it is very, very simple. But let's see them working first. Shall we see if this works? Well, I think that's a success. As I said, these are the ones that I've chosen to install, the MTB MP1s, slow action point motor with a built-in switch. So what do we get? So we get the rod, we get the point motor, an instruction sheet, and a little bit of information on the back. So if you would like to pause the video and give that a quick read, there you go. So we're going to need a screwdriver. As you can see with the instructions here, you need to set, there's a small pin in there, and you need to set that at 3mm, 6mm or 9mm, depending on what gauge you're modelling. There is 2 screws just on the back here. Just get them open and done. Now there's 2 ways of doing this. You can take the back plate completely off, just be careful of the clips on this side, or you can just pop it up just a touch and slide the mechanism out. As you can see, after taking off that plate, we have 2 holes, and there's another hole there with a little bit inserted in. So referring back to the instructions, we have 3, 6 or 9mm throwing distance. Don't use cutters either, just in case you cut through it. So if you can see that tiny little thing, do not lose this. There should be a spare one in the packet, and they usually do come with a spare, but this one hasn't. Replace that little stud into the correct hole, like so. Looking on the back of the actual plate, there is a little groove in the middle. That stud needs to sit in this groove, like so. Pushing the top down, and now it's a simple case of putting those screws that you put somewhere safe back in. Do not over tighten these because it is going into plastic. You do not want the plastic to crack. So the next step, you need a flat bladed screwdriver, and we're just going to take off this one. And what this is going to allow us to do is remove the front plate, like so. And this is, of course, when we can fit the rod. There's two grooves in here. This one is the larger groove, the rod that comes with it. I suspect this one is if you want to switch it out for maybe some thinner piano wire or something like that. So we're just going to rest that in. Now, if you can see, just there, next to the thinner groove, there is, again, a little hole. Looking on the back of the plate, there is a stud. That stud needs to fit in that hole. Excuse fingers while I tighten this up. We're just going to tighten that one that we unscrewed. We're now putting it back on. And that is all the prep work needed. The next thing you need to do is get this into your board, and then you can measure up how far this rod sticks through. Normal other point motors like the Cobalts, you can't change this, so you have to get a Dremel out and chop it off. With this, what you can do is if we just loosen that off a little bit, let's say it's up to the board, yeah, it's come all the way through, it's sticking out of the point this much. So now, loosening that off, we can just slide it down till it sits flush and tighten it back up. There's the instruction manual, it's got the wiring diagram on there as well, and take a read. So I'm going to try my best to explain this. As you know, I am no wiring expert, but I did manage to wire this in myself without any need for any help. So, the common is the red, and that runs all the way down to the power supply. Okay, it's just temporary at the moment, but that would run to your power supply. And that again goes to the common, this one just here. And then we've got the blue and the yellow. These do not matter which way they're wired in, they run to the switch. Now the switch we're using is a 3-pronged single pole double throw, I believe it's called. We've got the yellow and the blue as mentioned running to pos 1 and pos 2. So that just leaves us with the black in the middle, and again that runs back down to that same power supply. Very simple, even I managed to do it. That does leave us with 3 terminals still not occupied by anything. So we've got aux 1, that is of course the green frog wire for the electrofrog / unifrog points. And that just leaves the remaining 2 terminals, that is of course track power. And it's as simple as that. Now, if you're not using electrofrog point and you are using Insulfrog, aux 1 can actually be used for a signal. So that's been a deep dive into everything you need to know, or more or less everything you need to know about point motors. And we've also gone through the wiring on the MP1s by MTB. These are a great option. I think I'm going to use these for the rest of the boards in the future. Thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button and I'll see you next Wednesday.